I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. It's Thursday. No, it's Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. Boy, the time flies. And Wednesday, we talk about wealth creation, business, home ownership, generational wealth, things about business and about developing and promoting our entrepreneurial selves. Well, today we want to move in that direction with two superb entrepreneurs, women who are leaders in their professions and in the business of building awareness, knowledge about our capabilities and what we deliver to each other and to the world in the business space. First of all, let me say hi to my co-host and writer partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Brenda, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Very glad to be here.
Well, good to see you. As always, hopefully, I know that we'll have a great conversation. And I want to start by introducing a new friend, the person that I've watched for a bit, and that is Sadia Ali. She's the owner
of that name.
Isn't it a beautiful name? Well, the name, she wears it well, and the name wears her well as well, I think. The company is called the Creative Studio MN, and she's got two studios located here in Twin Cities. And by way of background, the Creative Studio Minnesota is a studio that handles all kinds of media and marketing material needs for small businesses, for nonprofits, and solopreneurs. Great word, solopreneurs. They work in three arenas. One is media production, in marketing material, and in event space work or preparation. They handle media like video production for businesses, for brands, for bridal shoots. They have a design center that does online and print designs for businesses and personal brands. And they also do event space, management for events of all kind. And they do more. Let me welcome and introduce Sadia Ali. Sadia, how are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, let's start. You've got a powerful video. Let's start with the video to let that be the beginning, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
I'm the owner of the Creative Studio Minnesota. It's two studios located in the Twin Cities, and we handle all media and marketing materials for small businesses, nonprofits, and solopreneurs. It's also a space for creatives by a creative. During the pandemic, just as any other small businesses, we got impacted. Our business is mainly service business, so a lot of our group shooting actually got impacted. We had to kind of minimize, and also a lot of our studio rentals as well. So we did a lot of interesting things to kind of pivot the business. We kind of still try to serve the clients without much contact. One of the cool things we came up with was, for example, when we're doing product photography, the client literally drops off the product with a mask on and then leaves it. We do it for them, and we literally leave it by the studio. They come pick it up. So it was very interesting to kind of look at how we do different tasks and see how we could kind of make it safer. What kept me going was actually the eager to find more resources to see how we could make the business continue regardless of what was happening. Also the background and where I come from, a lot of us, when it comes to our parents and even our grandparents, we just find a way to do things. We don't give up easily. To be selected as a RISE recipient, it meant a lot to me to get resources. The services that we got from the Comcast RISE is actually the heart of many stuff that we do. The technology package is helping us communicate with our clients in a better way. When COVID came and the pandemic came, a lot of us didn't know where things were going. We were very appreciative. I would encourage other business owners to apply for the Comcast RISE. Comcast RISE program has a lot of benefits and resources for small businesses, especially minority and Black-owned businesses. When I got the call from the program coordinator for the Comcast RISE, letting me know that I got accepted into the program, I was very excited about it because I think anytime having extra resources on board is very good for any small business owner.
What a great story, and what a beautiful story. Story well told. Sadia,
Tastefully
good
done,
afternoon once again.
classy.
I was gonna say thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting rewatching myself the video. It's just really funny. Yeah, we actually had it was a fun day shooting the campaign too that time. So a lot of
Take a
fun.
minute to talk about the Comcast RISE program. We've committed to interviewing as many as possible of the participants in that program because we think it's an important investment by Comcast in supporting entrepreneurs in our community. Their program was to provide, I think, at least $10,000 to 100 businesses last
Yeah,
year and the same this year. So $1 million of
yeah,
cash invested. But on top of that, investing technical support, marketing support. I think that's phenomenal. And they're setting, from my point of view, the standard of how companies ought to be engaging in building capacity in our community. So from your point of view,
yeah.
you described it in the video, but tell again, what it means to have access and to gain more access for your brand and for your work.
Yes. So honestly, when I think so everything happened so fast, but looking back, I think I was so appreciative of the experience. I want to start off saying by saying that I think COVID itself, the pandemic was just not anything anybody planned. So
Right.
being a business owner, especially small business owner, and everything's kind of shutting down, you're kind of looking around like what is what. And actually if we go back to Minnesota, I think it was 2 years ago, we had actually restrictions where certain amount of times we had to kind of shut down. You couldn't have as many people in the studio. So at that time, I was like, okay, you know what? It's time. I think everybody at that point was like searching for resources as well. One thing I want to say about Comcast is that corporations in general collaborating with small businesses is what we need. So that is, I think, the key point, especially with minority businesses. So definitely at that time as a business owner, especially as a small business owner, I was like, okay, what resources are out there? Because we knew that when the pandemic came, because it interrupted our regular, services, what can we look into? And then when I saw the Comcast program, I'm like, you know what? I think we'll be a good fit for it. So yeah, we went ahead and kind of presented our studio and stuff. And then when they reached out, I was like, yes, let's see, what we could kind of benefit from this collaboration. And one thing I want to say is that I believe that it is a collaboration. It's from both ends. As much as the corporations are benefiting the small businesses are benefiting the corporations.
Right.
But it was really kind of wonderful. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Well, I want to ask you
Yeah.
in a few minutes to talk about the whole notion, the concept of marketing and communications within our community. I think that there are some unique challenges, unique perceptions and misperceptions about the value of professional marketing and communications. And I think that you and I both, as professional communicators, as businesses, have to overcome either misunderstanding or reticence in our community about the value that we can and should bring to each other. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do, I wanted to get your personal story. How did you come to this work? What's your training and background? And take a chance to talk about your family and your community,
Sure.
and mention and praise any community members or elders or
Oh yes,
mentors,
yes.
people that
Yeah.
help you shape your own destiny that you've taken into your hands to be
Yeah.
a small business owner.
Yes. Actually, I always say this that I think life is a journey. So sometimes you're just going along the journey, and 5 years or 7 years down the line, where you end up, you don't even know you're going to end up there. So for me, when I look back at my journey, I didn't know fully. I mean, we do have, a little bit of business background on my family side, especially my grandparents, and that side, especially my grandmother. But I think when I was being young and growing up, I wasn't thinking like I'm gonna run and be a business owner. I think I let life just kind of play it out. And then I was a rebel. I'm not gonna lie, I was a rebel. I was always the type to just not follow the crowd. I got bored easily. So I'm just like, I'm gonna do what makes me happy. So I think just to kind of go back a little bit, I'm from Africa originally, but I did kind of grow up in America. So technically I'm Somali American. We're from the South, Nashville, Tennessee. And then we moved up here in Minnesota back, I think, late 90s. Our culture is very collective. A lot of African cultures, Asian cultures are very collective. So if they find a good space, they're just like, hey, come over here. So we did end up moving here. The option was between Minnesota or Maine. We ended up moving to Minnesota. So this is where
Your
pretty much I grew up.
microphone is coming in and out a little bit. I don't know if you where your
I
mic
think,
is.
I
Your
think, yeah.
microphone is, we're losing a
Okay.
little bit, but
I
go
think
ahead,
the
try it
last
again.
kind of winded. Okay. Yeah. So basically, originally we're from Africa, like I said, and then our family is from the South Nashville, Tennessee, and then we did move up here in Minnesota, and that's where I grew up and kind of went to my school and everything. I was traditionally kind of just going the traditional art, like just any young kid, kind of figuring the things out. I was creative innately at a very young age. I was combining, I mean, it goes from High Five to MySpace days. I was combining technology with graphics, but I think looking back when you're young, you don't realize that. And then as I got older, because now I'm more in media actually, and then I remember taking one class about women's media or something. I find it interesting, but I went the typical route of just, getting older, high school. I did post-secondary, actually left high school early, typical going through the courses and stuff. And I noticed that, and then I start working just in corporate as well too. And I noticed that everything I'm doing, I learn very fast and I get bored. So something that originally take me 8 hours, as I learn, I will get it done within 4 hours or 2 hours. So I needed to be challenged basically. And so I started doing my creative stuff on the side, and then it was something I just kind of enjoyed. So way back years ago, I started as a freelance photographer. And I think innately, so you can learn something technically, where you kind of or finding out the numbers, if you're doing photos, F something, whatever, the background, everything. And then there's innately where you already know what shots you're going to get and what you want.
Mhm.
So for me, I already had the innate talent. I could see something and I'm like, okay, I want this shot or that shot when it comes to video photo. So I had to back it up with myself learning in terms of making sure what software, what things need to come into place to make sure that this vision that I see is coming kind of live. I would say like friends and families were very supportive in terms of just way back when I started freelancing. So and even before the business I started, I didn't even know there was a need in the community. So right now our studio focuses on woman owned and minority owned.
Mhm.
Earlier, I think you mentioned there is a little bit of I wouldn't say struggle, but there's a little bit of making sure whether you're a solopreneur or small business, making sure that your communication is professional, making sure that you're communicating what you want, whether it's written, video, anything to your clients, right? So, and with our business, so coming back, I'm all over the place, but coming back, so freelancing, going through, and then slowly going through studios. I think I started with Minneapolis. I moved to St. Paul. I took over that studio. So that's when the business pretty much started. And then as we continue, add more services, and then I opened the second location. But the first thing we focused on was just video campaigns. I mean, some people were doing it, but it wasn't doing the level that I was doing it, because for me at that time, we were having contract team. So per project, somebody will work on it. As a director, I'll oversee everything. I'll make sure the client's, idea comes to life, while also guiding them to make sure that, hey, if you're a nonprofit, this is what we suggest. If you're a business, this is what we suggest. But the biggest thing I would say that started to grow our business is our market that we target and our prices.
Mhm.
So we went after small starting businesses and mid-size. We did not go early on. We did not go after the big ones, right? And those market areas, especially minority businesses, they're not working with a lot of money.
Right.
So the question become, how can we give quality at the same time we're not charging you thousands, right? And at the same time, making sure that the team who's working on the project is also kind of getting paid.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge. It wasn't easy. But I think at the end of the day, but I think looking back, that's the challenge probably that I needed, right? To make sure that to fix something. And I always say that as a business owner, your business is your baby, and you're constantly doing software updates. You're constantly doing policy updates. I mean, you might have a new client, you might have an issue, and it's like, oh snap, I have to add that policy because I didn't know that coming, right? And contracts. Oh my God, contracts. Another thing I want to say, and I'm like I said, I'm from Africa. We have more oral tradition, right? So
Mhm.
my word is, my word is my word, right? But no, you need to have contracts. So I think early on, anything above 250, we're having contracts, making sure that the studio sign, the customer sign, and even contracts you lay out like, listen, this is what you're getting, right? This is what you're getting, because sometimes what somebody's paying for and what they want to get is two completely different things, right? So
Right.
they might pay for something for 500, which is one of our lowest packages, and now the packages have changed as well too. But you want a quality that's 5,000, right? And it's like, it's not adding up. It's like, let's revisit this, campaign instead, right? Or even the length of the campaign, right? We have editors, once again, who work on contract. If that person took 10 hours, so for me, it was me sitting down as a business owner And luckily, the good thing about me is I am in the creative field. You know, I can definitely do campaigns, like, you know, I can see everything. So if anything messed up, I will go in and fix it. But I oversee everything. But I think the biggest thing that also saved us was creating packages and saying that, hey, if you choose package B, this is what you're getting. If you
Mhm.
don't want this, then you might want to consider going up or down, right? So if your
Mhm.
budget's low, then go down, but this is what you get. If you have extra budget and you want more, this is what you get. And that communication is basically kind of what went on. And also diversifying my business as well, to making sure that we have studio rentals, other stuff like you said, event space, because we have pretty studios. Everybody likes a place that's well lit. But coming back to it, yeah. So I didn't know I was going to be a business owner, but I did realize my passion for media as it grew. And obviously, you know, this is my business and, you know, my baby. But for me also right now, just as an individual, I'm working more on bigger media productions, and hopefully we're starting to do some projects, some in Africa, and even some covering here our community and stuff too as well.
So
Um,
I
Go
got a
ahead.
whole bunch of questions. Everything you're saying gives
I
me
know I could.
questions to ask, and this is
There's so
wonderful.
much. There's so
Yeah,
much. Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
so
Yeah.
cool. So I want to know about your grandma, your
Yes, my
family,
grandmother.
and the entrepreneurial
Yep.
gene
Yes.
that is in you from your biology. Talk about that first, and then I've got a discussion with you that will share my experiences working with our people and the
Hmm.
challenges of working with
Yes.
our people, whether our people
Yes.
believe us or believe in whether we believe in ourselves or whether
Yes.
we are fixated on what people outside of us say about us and who we are, and
Yes.
how that impacts how we act with each other. So talk
Yes.
about your family first of all, and
Yes.
I'm
So
glad you mentioned that your grandma was an entrepreneur. What does that
and my
mean?
mom, yeah, my
Okay.
mom was
Yeah.
also like such a, she used to always constantly work too as well. First of all, I just wanted to say that I am Pan-African, so anything relating to history and African, our people, I'm big on it. My grandma, which is my mom's mom, so their family back then, now, I mean, obviously Africa is kind of divided up, but our side of the family, they a little bit kind of stayed in Ethiopia side, which is still Somali kind of territory, you know, but the lines are different. But my grandma, before, I think by the time she got married, she moved up, and she was kind of doing business with her brothers, which is my mom's uncles. They used to
Your
have a
family is
livestock.
Somali or Ethiopian?
Somali, but in Africa, a lot of territories are blurry.
Sure, sure.
But so you could see like one kind of people living in three different countries pretty much,
Right.
but we're Somali, yes.
Okay.
So my grandma was doing business with, you know, her brothers, which is my mom's uncles, and back then they started off doing livestock. So they were kind of trade export livestock, and then I think my uncle, from what my mom was telling me, was also doing, I think back then, and it was like probably back in the 60s, 70s, but you will see what is kind of needed in the market, and he will kind of go and kind of export himself. So as much as they started with the animal part, you know, but they were doing other businesses. And then later on, I think my grandma's side of the family, and I think that side, they end up having some sort of a factory. And there's actually a big nickname. So even though we have our last name, but the nickname of the factory is also a nickname that our family kind of calls us as well. So, and I think back then, looking back, maybe business came natural to people because you own the land, you
Hmm.
just own a lot of assets, right?
Hmm.
So you're not really having a lot of overhead and stuff. And it's like, okay, I'm going to kind of get up and contribute something to society. So my grandma, and then the war happened in the early 90s. So that's when I was born. I always say that my mom was running when I was born. So I was born out of the fire. I'm here to kind of, you know, change a lot of things. It's a little joke for me. But no, my mom actually early on was working with a lot of, so obviously when the war happened, a lot of people came to Kenya early on just for safety. But my mom was working with a lot of the UNCR, UNICEF, a lot of the groups pretty much. So early on the ground. And my mom at that time was very young too. So I get a lot of, I think, I mean, like I said, lineage is very important, and it's really good to know how, what is coming down, you know, the grandma side, you know, the mom side, what is coming down in the lineage. It could be strength and weaknesses, right?
Hmm.
So I always say that I think the woman before me, ahead of me, always were very strong. So I guess I came out swinging. It's a little joke. So
Wonderful.
but yeah, my mom, to finish off, my mom, yeah, she worked with the UNCR and all that stuff, and then later on, obviously, we end up coming here as well too. And to this day, my mom still does her own thing. So it was just like, I think for my grandma. And then hearing those stories, you get so inspired. So it's like, wow, like you hear the stories of your grandma back in the 60s and stuff and 70s, and that kind of motivates you.
So let me, that's great to hear that. Let me tell you what I was thinking about. When I started the business, two things were happening. I'm a trained journalist out of the university and worked for the St. Paul Daily newspaper, and decided at one point in time that not only could I be a good reporter, but I could own this place. I could be my own publisher, owner of a news enterprise. And that's where the idea came from, that I should create Insight, and it has grown to be the largest circulation ethnic newspaper in Minnesota. But the light bulb went off. But the challenges early on were twofold. Within the Black community, there is always, from my point of view, a skepticism about the value that we can bring to each other. What do you mean by that, Al McFarlane? I mean that, and I think this is a consequence of colonialism, of the mentality of white supremacy. There's a feeling that, if it's real, it has to be sort of done by white people or approved by white people, or if white people validate it, it must be real. But if it comes out of our experience and the knowledge that we have, our ideas, we are suspicious of that too often. So we hesitate sometimes, in my experience, doing business with each other until we think that there is an approval from somebody outside of us. That's a big statement to make. I want you to think about that. Then on the other side is that when we started the newspaper, I would go to white companies and say, I have a newspaper that reaches people in North Minneapolis, Black people for sure, but also the white people that live there. And I can tell you, Sadia, I was told by some corporate people, don't tell us about white people that read your newspaper. We're not interested in reaching white people through you. We have our own for reaching white people, And so our only interest in you is if we can reach Black people, but we do not look to you for your influence and your reach into the white marketplace. Now, I may be oversimplifying, but this is what I recall and what I remember. And it reflects the supremacy, the superiority, the what do you call it? The cultural arrogance of white people. And so we have fought that kind of environment outside, telling the market that our numbers are growing. We have not emphasized the truth that the people we reach include our people plus people around our community. The truth of that is that the white people that live in North Minneapolis are white people that see themselves as part of the Black community. They choose to be here, and they would say, I'm a member of the Black community. And so that's a reality that the corporate don't yet acknowledge or respect, but that will come in time. But the second part goes back to the first statement, and is how do we convince our people that we have the capacity in us to speak to us and for us? You mentioned you're a Pan-Africanist, and I say that in the spirit of Pan-Africanist vision. I believe that we as African people have to envision a world that respects and reflects our dignity, our vision, and the future that we want to create for ourselves and for humanity. Now, I've said a whole bunch. I'll throw it in your hand. You can react however you want to.
I was gonna say, no, honestly, you're saying a lot of really good stuff. You really did say a lot of good point and heavy stuff. I do agree with that part where you said that if it doesn't have anything white in it, it's not professional or it's not approved. I would say, honestly, being in media and now obviously also owning my business, I would say a lot of minority people, whether you're African diaspora or African American, both, a lot of us, there's a campaign, I say a 400 years campaign against us to make sure that we'll see our value, right? So I think it goes back to awareness, going back to, okay, who are you, right? Because I always say that if you really don't know who you are, anybody could market to you who you are, right? So you really got to go back and say that, you know what, who am I, right? And for me, I'm also big on healing. I'm big on spirituality too as well, right? To really get to know yourself. It's interesting you say that also when you told them that, hey, we grew in this area, north Minneapolis, but we also have this audience that they were not interested in that, right? It kind of reminds me also sometimes how big companies kind of would have the token in their marketing materials, the token, minority person, or once they're doing other collaborations, there's this tokenism going on. Sometimes there's not really genuine connections going on, right?
Right.
And we're not even going to get into, well, a lot of the wealth, where does it reside in the country and all that. For me, what I've seen in my journey, and I feel like I'm still kind of growing and not even where I want to be, but I did see a lot of resistance. I would say I'm a little bit lucky. I didn't face a lot of resistance, but I do see the systems in place that do prevent a lot of minorities from really excelling. And excelling could look different to anybody. So it might be like, I want to stay in my corporate. I want to maybe open a business, whatever the case might be, right? So for me, early on when I was saying I'm a Pan-African, I'm talking about I'm in support of how can minority people just find their peace and whatever success looks to them. So coming back to answer some of the stuff, I would say, yeah, there is, and yeah, there is a divide and conquer campaigns. Early on, I think when I was in Nashville, Tennessee, early on, I don't know, when people ask me where I was from, I would just say Africa, right? Because I don't know, I was proud African early on, I have no idea. Back in the day, some of the kids would hide where they're from. I'm like, I'm from Africa, and I remember some of the people remember the images of National Geography, right? And also that's how powerful media is and how we portray it. Because sometimes when I'm not able to do business with another minority person, right, or another minority person is not able to trust ourselves, we're not able to trust ourselves, right? It all comes down to what are we seeing, what images, right? And we're not seeing the best images at all, right? So, and there's not spaces to really put confidence within ourselves, right? And then let's not forget when somebody kind of makes it, it's like, oh, you're forgetting about us, the guilt stuff, it can kind of go deep. But I would say, to answer simply, there is a lot of honesty images and campaigns against us that sometimes we forget who we are. And I would say, if you want to grow and become successful, you really have to walk into the room and kind of demand it. So that comes from doing your self-worth, even if the people in the room might not have the best interest for you or might not like you, right? And I network. I also started a nonprofit, by the way, for Somali American girls with another Somali sister in the community. And we kind of honestly work with them sometimes when we have events, the basic of, hey, you're in a company, they're having a meeting, they're saying something out of line. How do you speak? How do you stand up, right? So by doing your internal work, you could kind of show up in the world and kind of educate them. And, and if somebody's really being also nasty, you could just be professional and kind of, keep it moving too. But yes, there is divide and conquer. But one thing I want to mention quietly is that I was so proud to see the 2019, I think, Ghana return. A lot of African Americans are going back to Africa. I'm just so happy to see this exchange.
Yeah.
I go to Africa every year as much as I can. I've been to Morocco. I came back from Kenya. So I always tell everybody, I'm like, just travel and you will see the world is so different as well too.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. Good to hear. I have spent a number of visits to Africa as well. Mine to Ghana and also to Uganda, and with a brief stopover in Kenya, just an airport stop, but time in Uganda and a lot of time in Ghana in particular. And I love it. And I think it's important that we use travel and digital travel to place ourselves in the culture. I was telling my friend, you might know him, Tom Guetta. Do you know him? Tom Guetta is the editor and owner.
The name sounds familiar, probably. I know more faces.
You know Charlie, the publication, right? He's a.
Oh yes. I've seen some of the I think they did events back then. Yeah, I've seen.
Right,
it, yeah.
he does events, but he's from Kenya, and so we talk all the time. We do business together, and what was I telling you? I forgot the reason I wrote his name up. But
is he from Africa as well? Okay.
He's from Kenya, but he's here, and he has Charlie publication. We were talking just about marketing. We work together to promote reach to the African community. And whatever thought I had, it's gone now. It'll come back to me later on. I had a point.
You know what? You know what I say? I say thoughts. They go in circles. They come back.
They come back. Yeah.
When they come back, we revisit them. Yeah. No. One thing I want to say is I think I came across his he has a news something. I saw it
Newspaper,
way
yeah,
back. Yeah, he's been doing his work in the community.
yeah. Well, let me go to one more story. So much travel. So I've been to East Africa and West Africa. I think it's important for, as you said, the year of return at Ghana, for
Yes.
more and more of us to go back. Yesterday's program, after the show, I talked to one of the participants who said she's with a group from Minneapolis that's going to be going to Senegal in November. And so it's a group trip. And I told her that's so wonderful that we need to do more of that, and not just Ghana, not just Senegal or West Africa, but figure out how to experience different parts of the African world. So Tom Guittard and I were talking. I was telling, this is the point. I was saying, I watch a lot of, because of YouTube and Netflix, African movies now.
And Nigerian movies, yes. And I watched that Ghana too, yes.
Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, all kinds of wonderful creativity. And what I've discovered is that the stories that are being made into movies they're human, they're global, they're universal. They are about global, both ethics and morality, and how human beings either succeed or fail. All of us are capable of failure, and all of us hopefully can find redemption. But the story of failure and redemption and aspiration, they tell it again and again and again in different languages, different crises, different opportunities. And it's wonderful to watch all of the things that human beings experience through the lives of our own people. That's the point I'm going to make. Because what we have been getting before that was that reality was the story of Europe and of Europeans, and not our story. I listened to another program on a talk show where the author said that in history, the colonizers practiced the strategy of decapitating our people. And he meant that in two levels. In the battlefield level, part of the strategy was to decapitate leaders. This was a conversation that had to do with maybe the British and, the Queen, the monarchy, and how the British and other Europeans invaded and colonized different aspects of Africa. That in battles, particularly against people that resisted greatly, they would decapitate a leader or a king or a warrior.
Yes, I actually have. Yes,
take his head to London, right? And there was a story about one guy's head being taken where it was set next to the head of a person from either Indonesia or Australia, one of the other places that the British colonized. I can't remember the details, but that's the concept. The lesson was that though that was a physical activity, there was also the social, intellectual activity of decapitating the mind of African people, killing the mind and replacing in us, killing our memory or discounting, devaluing our memory, and attempting to replace our memory with a memory of Europe, so that we would grow up reciting the greatness of the empire and knowing nothing about the greatness
our empires.
Our empires. That's the point I'm making. So talk about that.
It's funny because when you said they do go very harsh on leaders that resist and set an example of them, my dad's side, the tribe, is actually very close to a leader that kind of was fighting off the British when back then, 1960s, I think so, 50s. It goes way back before we got our independence. A lot of African countries got their independence, the second independence, I think late 50s, early 60s. So he was called, I think, Muhammad Said Abdullah, which he's literally the same tribe as my dad. And then my dad back then in Somalia was a big general. So that's why I say it's very important to know your lineage, because sometimes you literally pick up talents and things, and you're just passionate about certain things and you really don't know what until you kind of go deep. Yes, I think, he was fighting so harsh and he didn't like the fact that, people were coming over and telling him what to do. He didn't like it. He was just like, let us leave in peace. So they actually nicknamed him Mad Mullah. They didn't like his resistance, nothing, right? So and that kind of makes me think about how even sometimes, even now on media too, when we see somebody kind of resistant, they kind of do a campaign against your character, right?
Yeah.
So if you read the books, it's like Mad Mullah, and it's like, well, at least can we have the basic respect of calling this man his name? And at the end, he won. I think Somalia got their independence, and later on, I think later on they still came after him. So yeah, definitely. There is a lot of things I think that does happen, whether especially in Africa as well, and then now even in America too, the last 400 years too as well. Um, so it's but yeah, I was gonna say go ahead. Yeah, so it's very interesting. The whole thing is very interesting. But for me, I think knowing that hey, that person is very close in my lineage and tribe wise, I did kind of take a peek at that and say that okay, because I always say that you can't really control even what family you're born into, what lineage. You're
Right.
just born, right? And
Yep.
sometimes maybe you do have a mission here, right?
Yep.
That's where my spirituality kind of kicks in. So for me, it's like okay, the more I understand myself, maybe the more my mission will be more clear to me. One thing I do want to say that I'm highly passionate right now, that I'm focused on my energy as I grow up in business wise, is media and how media is presented, and how, because like I said, for us to really love ourselves, we have to be presented in terms of who we are, right? A lot of stories are not told correctly. Another example I want to give, in some African countries, French, the kids when they're young, they're learning other countries' culture, language, and everything. So that's where taking over the mind comes in, right? I'm like, we need to learn our history, So it is very interesting. I always say there's a lot of war against your mentality, and you really have to regain your mind. You really have to, kind of regain. But luckily, I think, was it Djibouti? I was talking to a friend of mine. I think they stopped it in the early 2000s. I'm not sure, but they finally stopped it. So they're teaching the basic language, which is Somali too. Djibouti is another country as well. And I think even Kenya for a long time had British traditions and stuff. So I think slowly Africa's waking up. So, and we'll see what the future holds as well too. We're excited for it.
Well, I think Africans are waking up here as well. And when I say Africans, I don't mean only continental or only new immigrants, but those of us that are the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes.
We are Africans as well. I tell this story, Sadia. I say that one of the sisters that worked for me some 10, 15 years ago had gone to Ghana to work for a summer on a program and came back. And when she came to my office downtown, she greeted me. She said, "Hello, African." And I said, "What did you call me?" Because back then, coming through a period where our sense of Africa and Blackness was really shaped by media. And the media made us ashamed, wanting to not be identified with the image and what we thought was the misinformation about Africa, and also made us glorify the accomplishments of our oppressors, the colonizers, the Europeans, the supremacists, right? So she says to me, "Hello, African." And I almost recoil. "What did you call me?" And so
you're like, hold up, what?
she said, "Hello, African." And when she said it the second time, I said, "Boy, say it again, because that feels kind of good. It feels right." And say it again and say it again, because it was like getting a shower, getting a bath, getting a revelation, a light going off, an awakening in my spirit, in my soul. And so that is, I think, the power of us connecting with each other again and moving beyond the distrust and this distaste that we may have of each other, because we're operating from a mind that was placed on top of ours in our brain that sought to push out our natural minds, our natural thinking, and the natural genius that we have, our legacy, our history, our DNA. But as you were saying, Sadia, our people are becoming more aware, more awake. Travel does that. And I think that what the world is going to be experiencing as we do more, as we connect ourselves. And I love that you talked about the lineage, your father's line and your mother's line, because all of that gives you power,
Yeah, it's the DNA. Yeah.
And one thing, Brenda's going to say something.
Go ahead, Brenda.
No, I just wanted to bring up, when you talked about the Brits and colonization. now that the Queen has passed, or transition is, I think, a softer word, but now they say, well, don't talk to us about reparations. Look at the supply chain. Who started the supply?
Good one. Yeah.
And so this is now this big crusade about looking into the Black leadership and hierarchy, and that they were the ones that supplied the Brits with all of the slaves. And I said, boy, they have come up with something. And I was asking a couple of our colleagues, I said, did they really have a choice? You know, was there a choice? So it's interesting how all of this has begun to surface, but it might be a good thing because it might bring about critical thinking within high school students and college students to be able to dig deeper with our history and negate some of the things that are in the textbooks.
Yeah.
So I'm coming from a retired educator and so angry about how long it took, you know, for our kids to really get their history when their parents didn't get it, and it's sort of difficult for them to teach it. So anyway, I love the conversation. And that ad was really classy. I've got to say that again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. No, to add to something, I do follow the conversations that are being had between Africans, African Americans, and just minorities in general. We have to understand that there's a lot more Black people even in South America. I mean, I was watching a TikTok video about how there's a Black person in Mexico. So, but one thing I noticed is that we all kind of face the same issue of, you know, the places where we're at, the countries, we're not getting the best, you know, route for success. You know, there's systems against us. One thing I want to say is I think there's a lot of healing needed, honestly, from both sides, right? And I always say that at the end, we're one big family. We're going to have our issues, but we also need to have those tough conversations. We cannot just sit and smile and act like everything is okay, right? Another African girl, she mentioned something very interesting. She said that, you know, basically, and the history obviously is being told, so nobody was really there alive, you know, but she said that certain people are saying that, okay, there's a certain amount of Africans back then that was sold. What really happened, right? And for me, I would say, like, it would be interesting to do like a tough research, or just like go into Africa and really even understanding the history of what really kind of happened. So I would say a lot of healing from both sides, and just more conversations and kind of coming together. One thing I noticed even from growing up the past 20 years and so on, we are connected more. I remember we weren't even like, I don't think there's even spaces to ever connect. We're connecting more, we're talking more, whether it's digitally, whether it's locally. I recently went to another, I think it was a Nigerian, they have different states, different cities, and they have different, not mayors, but leaders. One of the guys came to Minnesota, and they had a dinner for him. And I went there, and he was talking about a lot of great conversation. Some African Americans were there too as well. So for me, I was like, we need to kind of connect more and talk more. And coming back to wealth build, and I know that's one of the things we're going to discuss today. By even understanding the systems and what is happening in the healing, we could kind of find our value. And then when you have an idea, or, you know, because I always say that God gives, you know, different ideas and different brains, different minds to people, right? So by then, when you have the confidence, you can move forward, whatever that looks like, right? So you might invent something, you might start a business, you might, you know, whatever you want to do, because right now, even, and hopefully even tackling those issues where you could get those finances to even start those issues, to start those ideas, right? So it comes down to healing, and I welcome critiques, and I say that we need to have tough conversations. I mean, for me, if you ask me, I'm like, we need to have even debates and different things. But I think a lot of people are definitely hurt, and for me, even when I think about the African American side, because now getting older, I understand the importance of lineage, and understand the small things, different culture, how that kind of suits you in different ways, right? I met a couple African Americans, and they were like, hey, I took my DNA, you know, this is where I'm at, so I'm gonna go this area. And I'm like, okay, that's a good place to start, you know? So it's really kind of unfair, also erasing history from people, right? And one thing they don't mention is like people that came over, or 600 years ago, there were different cultures and religions too, right? They just kind of made it like a monolith, and now obviously us, especially being in media, African Americans kind of really rule the culture, right? They kind of decide a lot of things that are moving, but we don't have also a lot of assets, and we don't have a lot of ownership, right? So that's another thing talking about. Go ahead, yeah. We're talking about really good topics, so we can talk forever.
Well, this is cool. I'm loving the conversation as well. And it's cool to talk to you, Sadia, as another media person. So this is a conversation among media and communications professionals. And it's important because we are analyzing the power of the word, the power of speech, the power of image, and the necessity for our people to be in ownership of our words, our language, our thoughts, our images, and to be intentional in portraying a reality, defining it in a way that describes the fullness of our existence, to not be suppressed and squeezed into little caricatures or cartoons that take one element of our distress or of our failure and ignores all the rest of our humanity. That's what the Europeans have done, and they use that strategy to justify extraction of minerals, extraction of wealth, extraction of our genius, of our lives, our culture. I always tell people, one of my states or quotes is, white people love Africa, they just don't like the Africans. And so they would love to have Africa with no black people. And so you might say, Al, that's a harsh statement.
Oh no,
I'm
not surprised.
How can you say that? I say, well, let's look at North America. Who was here? They killed them. They're gone, right? And so they loved North America. They just didn't like the people that were here. And they had policy and practice that exterminated millions of people over a period of time. And they wanted to erase the people and erase the memory of what they had done. And the difference now, Sadia, is that we've moved into an area of technology where, as you said, and I say this too, the DNA allows us to reconnect that which they sought to destroy. They were intentional in dividing us from our past, from our history, and from each other. And they wanted to place in our minds and in our mouths a story that rationalized the idea that the world and God was their idea, that they created it, and that we should be happy to be at the edge and able to capture the crumbs, of their quote unquote success. Their success is the extraction of our property, our history, our culture, our lineages, and our genius. So I wanted to show, Vosh, if you put it up, what we've been doing is, I think, innovative and exciting. And one of the things we've added is a piece in the paper that I present in several languages. We started off with English and Spanish. I acknowledge the fact that my father is from Cuba, and that his family, Cuban, Jamaican, but all of us are African people, right?
Diaspora. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Well, we're from the motherland.
The motherland. So I ran this story in Spanish first, and then I have a friend who is from Bahia, and he's translating the story to run in Portuguese. And then he and I talked and said, you know what, we should also share this in Yoruba, because he and I were on a call with Yoruba people that went back from Brazil to Yoruba land, to Lagos, and we've had conversations in that group. And then he said, well, you know what, we should also do Swahili. I said, well, you know what, we should also do Somali, because there's this phenomenally huge Somali community here in Minnesota. And why don't we figure out what it would look like or feel like if we presented the same story in a half a dozen different languages that our people communicate in. So we're presenting in English, in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Somali, in Swahili, and in Yoruba. and it's experimental, it's innovative. I don't know that any neighborhood newspaper anywhere is doing this, but for me, it's both a challenge and an opportunity. And you could say it's impractical. Who in North Minneapolis or South Minneapolis is going to be able to read, French or Spanish or Somali or Portuguese?
Yeah.
And my answer to myself is that even if one person or two or
Read.
five are touched by it, if their curiosity is sparked, and if they say, you know what, maybe I have friends who are Somali. What if I try to understand this language? I have friends that are Mexicans or Latinos or South Americans. What if I got a feeling for the language, whether I learn it or not? Who knows whether there's a 5-year-old child or 7-year-old that can discover that all of these idioms are accessible, available, and that she or he could grow up speaking 5 languages, 7 languages, 10 languages, and represent our genius. Because I think in Africa, it is said many people are always conversant in several languages. I'll stop there. What do you think, Sadia?
There is, because a lot of times English is one of the big language. If you literally go to some African countries, French is the other one, and then they have local languages. And even within one country, it depends even the city and the villages, right? So even I think even within Somalia, there's different dialects as well. My mom knows 3 of it, right? My mom knows English too as well. So definitely different. I think language also is a way to really connect with people. You know what I mean? Like it's a way to sometimes way back, I remember taking one language, they talk about even like certain areas, you find words for certain things that are just found in that place, right? Yeah. That's how you know if it's some history, what was happening. No, that sounds like a really great idea. I was going to say, let me know that's like, I like the fact that you're also taking initiatives to just really even connect people. I always say that we need, those spaces. So thank you for doing that as well.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I also say is that when I worked as a member of the board of the Confederation of Somalis in Minnesota over in the Cedar Riverside area, I learned the story about the community having been forced by the conflict out of Somalia into Kenya and Uganda and places. One of the things that I heard is a story of arriving in Kenya and seeing that a lot of the Kenyans, the ordinary people, were being shut out of the commercial space because Indians were controlling the commerce, right? And they wondered why. And the Indians routinely kept the Africans out of the commercial arena.
Areas.
Right?
Yeah.
They had a system that they worked and it worked for them. And they said, why change it? And so the Somalis said, well, why don't we set up stores right next to them? And why don't we set it up in partnership with Kenyans so that Kenyans can be involved in this commercial space? I say that to say I am both amazed and pleased at the growth and proliferation of Somali businesses in Twin Cities. So the Somalis have developed an identity of the Somali as entrepreneurial, the culture.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, I was going to say on top of my grandmother, I think I got it from the community too. We open spaces.
Absolutely. And so the point for me, Sadia, is that we have to grow in our community this idea of entrepreneurship. I see my friend Anika is backstage. I didn't know she was there, but bring Anika on. We're moving towards the last few minutes of the program. Anika, how you doing, friend? I didn't see you there.
That's good. I'm well, sir. Good to see you. Hello.
Jump in the conversation.
I'm loving it. I'm back here like double Dutch. When do I get in?
Yeah, I apologize because I didn't get the note. I didn't see the note that you were back there, but so glad that you're there.
Thank you.
But jump in. And I don't know if you know Sadia, but Anika is the classic entrepreneur who is Pan-Africanist, who has African and American roots, and she lives in it, and she brings the glory of her identity and lineage to her interactions with people every day, all the time, and she's phenomenal. So with that, Anika, talk about this topic of how we grow a different image of who we are for ourselves and for the world.
Thank you so much. And I've been enjoying the conversation thus far. But listen, we are naturally, organically entrepreneurial. This is our heritage. And so listening, catching pieces of what Sadia has been saying, this is what it is when you come from Africa, and indeed throughout the diaspora, we always look for opportunities to build wealth, to create community, to open businesses, even through slavery. You know, there are several periods here in America throughout all the Jim Crow era. There are several, you know, testimonial stories of Black folk who have open barbershops, you know, open banks. You know, we hear of Black Wall Street, but they were not alone. You know, there were several Black communities, over 200 scattered across the South, and of course up north. So this is who we are. This is what we do. And it's woven into the work that I do with the Anika Foundation. It's woven into the work that David McGee and Jeff Robinson are doing at Build Wealth, Minnesota, with the 9,000 Equities program. But we are in a place where we need to remind our community of our legacy and our entrepreneurial heritage. And so we are all collectively working together to issue that call, just to remember, you know, a lot of it is innate. We're working with youth right now that, you know, they are thinking about different businesses. Some of the young folks in our youth program, they've discovered real estate investing. And so we're bringing folks in to talk with them about it. Someone else wants to start a vending machine company, you know, so this is just innate to who we are, but it hasn't always been fostered or encouraged, and conditions in the US have not always encouraged it, but we've been doing it by any means necessary. I mean, Black women are the fastest growing segment of new businesses in America, even more so through the pandemic, right? So we're going to do it, as Malcolm X says, by any means necessary. It's just, you don't really waver too far from who we are and where we come from.
Let me throw this in. We might go over time a couple of seconds, Vash, but my wife Bobby and I were talking this morning about the film, The Woman King. And my observation, I'm going to throw this out, criticize it, you know, kick it down the road if you wish. But now that I have three queens on the show with me here, you know, I'll risk being ridiculed and run out of town. I said, you know, that there's this maybe manufactured criticism. A friend that I talked to on the phone night before last, in fact, the paper coming up next week has a big story on that film, The Woman King. But I said, oh, so the guy I was talking to said, well, he went to see it, he liked it, pretty violent, but what it did, he thought, was pushed up against Black men. So my discussion with Bobby, my wife, this morning was, I don't think that's the case. Number one, I think that the story, as I'm hearing it, celebrates this capacity, the strength, the character, and the power and prowess of Black women. And if it pushes up against Black men and Black men's story, so be it. It means Black men need to be pushed. And part of the history is that there have been cases of women generals who, when men failed to act, said, we will act. And I said, as far as the violence is concerned, you know, TV violence is always gratuitous, but some of it comes from, you know, the historical record of what happens in conflict and in war. And what the takeaway ought to be is that women have this capacity and strength of leadership that includes, and this, you know, if you're timid, you can shut your ears on this. That includes the ability to act in ways that are mortal and fatal in defense and in conflict and in war. What are you saying? A woman can take a life and can organize in society and in culture to do what men think is their right but it's not the right of women to do. My position is that women can do the same thing and have done the same thing, and sometimes for the same reasons, sometimes for different reasons. But the capacity to take a life exists because it's a human being capacity. But the difference is the woman can also give a life.
Yes.
And therefore superior to the man.
Let me say
Go
something
ahead.
on that. Let me, if I may. So, because I've been noodling this around, right? And you really see it, especially in America, this conflict between the man and the woman, right? In African culture, it's really not like that. I believe, in my experience, there wasn't this gender tug of war. There was a mutual respect. You know, there were women chiefs. You know, my late grandmother, Joke Balogun, she was a chief. You know, she was a, you know, illustrious businesswoman. You know, I mean, so I just want to dispel some of that because I feel like that's a very European thing as well. And we've bought into some of those things, into some of that divisionary tactics between men and women. Now, women usually will step up if because we'll wait. Like someone like myself, I wait to see who's gonna, you know, because I don't need to be everywhere and do all things and be all things to everybody. But when we see that there is a need, it is innate to us because yes, we are givers and creators of life. So that motivation is not power. That motivation is not one-upism. It is preservation of the community. It is preservation. So it's not like, oh, I want to be king, you know, or I want to shut a Black man down. It is never that. Black women love Black men. Let me just say that emphatically. I love Black men. I love our elders, our uncles, my husband, all of that, right? So we need to stop playing these Jedi mind tricks in community. Whoever shows up, that's who we need to work with. And yes, um, this topic of killing. If you've never been in a situation of survival, the survival instinct kicks in for women because the first thing we do is protecting our children and our families. Men have that as well. But the difference is that men are expected to do these things. Women are kind of expected to kind of wait. But when all bets are off and it's like something clicks in women, like I have to preserve, because we understand legacy, we understand progeny, we understand all of these things. And so it's not even a rational thought. It's like we are here for the preservation of our culture, our way of life, our children, our communities, our villages. And back in those days, 1800s, early 1900s, so it was really real. The threat was really real. We're shielded a bit today, but we're still in a life or death situation. We just, you know, it appears different and we're comfortable. But we need to get away from this male female competition. Women we just do what we do and we show up to do what needs to be done, whether we're asked or not, whether there's money involved or not, or who's doing what. At least that's how I roll. And that's how many of the sisters that I know, that's how we roll. But thank you.
Brenda, what do you think?
I think that's the point, though, Anika. It's also economic.
Yes.
The first weekend, that movie made 19 million. Didn't go overseas or anything. Just the first weekend, they were given 50 million to do it. So you're just beginning. But you have a Black Academy Award winner. You have a Black producer, a Black director. So it's like the studios are saying, now, wait a minute. You know, you're dipping into our gold and it's going to be more. I know that story. And Viola had that sitting there, and also a Black production company, because it's Viola and her husband Julius's company that did it. So they've opened up a Pandora's box. And that's one of the problems. I mean, yeah, the movie's harsh. You know, Gail King was saying she sat up and she did this in the studio and she was in a private setting. But, you know, you have to hear Viola's interview with CBS. I mean, everything that she did, 5 hours of fencing and 10 hours of this, I mean, to build herself.
Yeah.
I don't know any actress that's been in any action movie that has trained the way that woman trained. And I mean, she's not like Ellen. I you know, Sadia and Anika Allen, I go back 70 years. We were in kindergarten together. But, you know, it reminds me that our mothers were that tough. You know, they stood and their voices were heard. They were not, they had no problems with their black men. You know, one of those 50-50 sometimes. But no, you know, I'm like you. We need to stop this. We need to come together, you know, and it goes back to Spike Moss the other day when they were talking about violence and whatever. And Spike just told the women, go get your child. You know, and that has just stuck there. I'm not asking you to save the world. I'm asking you to save your child. And that's the way our parents were. And if they couldn't save us, what was that? They had aunties and whatever that would. So, no, go see it.
Sadia, let me close with you. Just impressions, thoughts, final thoughts here. And thank you for being here. And yeah, go ahead, Sadia.
No, I was going to say thank you for having me too. I appreciate it. You guys are just saying wonderful stuff. So I'm taking it all in. But go ahead, yeah.
Okay, well, listen, thank you. I think we're out of time. We're over time, but this has been a great conversation. Let's do it again. I think it's important. I think talking about business, culture, about family, all of it critical. These are conversations we have to have in places like this, but also at the dinner table, you know, and on the playground, everywhere else we are. I'm Al.
Can I say something, Al? I'm sorry.
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
I really wanted to come on, especially on the heels of Queen Elizabeth passing.
Yeah.
And I just really want to stress the importance of adopting the mindset of stewardship in our community. The importance of stewardship. So ownership, you know, land and property is cool. And I would love to come back on and talk about that. But that's what Build Wealth is working on. That's what I'm working on. But we have to remind our communities and our brothers in particular that we are here to be stewards. So yes, we own things, but really the purpose is to take care of it and then prepare and increase it, right? Increase the value, the talent, right? And then be prepared to pass it on. They say their children are not our own, right? So I just wanted to plant that seed. Own this spirit of stewardship. We are here to prepare the next generation and the generation after next. It just puts a whole different perspective.
Definitely does.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add to earlier. I know we have to go soon. Earlier about the man and the woman, especially in African communities, African American communities. Earlier when I was saying I'm big on spirituality, it's a feminine and masculine, right? And I always say that we need each other.
Yes.
And we have to kind of think of the family unit. When we have a strong family units, you have strong communities, right? So it also kind of goes to different, and I think also there's a division there, you know, there's like campaigns. I always say there's campaigns against a lot of stuff that we need to be aware of, but yes, we do need each other as well. And thank you for having me. Yes, and we should have another conversation. Yeah, I like how you said it. Yes. I'm a big believer, the more blessings you get, how are you giving back? How are you, whether it's family, extended family, communities, what do you know? So definitely, I agree.
We don't run out of material, Sadia.
I could talk forever. My
we
mom
could
used to
go
say,
on
like,
and on and on.
Yeah.
Well, on Wednesdays, we want to have this topic. So I want to give you an open invitation to drop in any Wednesday. Anika is also helping us curate guests for the Wednesday program. And when she's available, she's here as well. So to both of you, please, whenever your calendars allow, jump in, because this is an unstructured or an open conversation. This is just us being with each other and
That's right.
having a chance to say what's on our mind. And that's the beauty of this conversation. So
Much
yes,
needed.
come back again on Wednesday and bring some friends. Bring some
Okay.
friends. Let's have a conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you all.